Hello, everyone. Welcome to Durrett's Take. Let's get started. So, there's a bunch of interesting college football news that happened recently, and the Houston Chronicle was the first to report it. And according to sources, that Texas and Oklahoma have reached out to the SEC to join the conference. Other people have said this is true, but sometimes, it's still technically a rumor. Sometimes rumors, you do have to take it with a grain of salt. Um, because there's been plenty of rumors before that were led to nothing. But the fact that both Texas and Oklahoma, and even SC Commissioner Greg Sankey, have not denied it, they're just like, no comment. Like they haven't said, oh no, that's not true at all. What? That's ridiculous. They haven't said anything. There's just no comment. Like we're not going to talk about that. Like so, but since they haven't denied it, that means there might be some truth to that. And the fact that it's Texas Oklahoma, it's going to might lead the Big 12 for the SEC is pretty outstanding. The SEC is going to have a super conference and solidify itself as the best conference. Now they do need to get 11 of the 14 SEC teams to approve, but that should happen. Now Texas A&M is most likely not, and then maybe Missouri because they're in the Big 12 and they probably don't want more Big 12 members. But other than that, the others should approve. Like Alabama, like in a way, you're like, yeah, we don't want more competition. We already have enough. But if you're Alabama, it's just like, well, with the playoffs expanded to 12 teams, like, why not bring it on? Make us even stronger. So that would be pretty interesting if this happens, and because not only if that happens, this could be a potential impact. This could be like over a decade ago where there's like a whole bunch of realignment, expansion. That's what could potentially happen with this. It doesn't have to be necessarily just Big 12 effect and SEC effect. It could be affecting all the other conferences in football in general. Now, this is not going to happen next year, if it were to happen. But like in 2024, 2025, when the TV contracts are over, then that's where we can kind of expect this to kind of all take place. So this would be kind of interesting to see if this happens. But what I want to do is I want to go over all the scenarios and see what it can kind of look like. But before I go over the scenarios, I do want to get started on a top 10 list of programs that are not in Power 5 right now, that could get an invite. One is obviously Notre Dame, who's independent. Now, they've said they're fine with being independent, but if for some reason this is like a big thing where all the Power 5 conferences are realigning and all that, then Notre Dame might have a change of heart, be like, okay, yeah, we should probably join the ACC full time. So that could be. They're obviously number one there. Number two, I have BYU, not to be biased, but Utah is becoming more of a good recruiting state, believe it or not. You have two of the top 10 picks, Zach Wilson and Penei Sewell, both in Utah. Just saying. But they're a top 20 program. Like I'm not talking about just football, but with all the other programs in college combined, and then you make a list of like a top 25. So that includes all programs: football, basketball, volleyball, all of them. BYU is in the top 20. They were this past year, and they usually are. Plus, you would get a national fan base with the church, being an owner of it, and then you get not only nationally but also globally, and then you just get. I feel like you're going to get a lot of TV ratings in general and all that, so I feel like it would be good. Now the one hiccup is no Sunday rule, but I feel like that shouldn't be a hurdle where it's too hard to overcome, and should be that should be the lone reason that they don't get to a P5 conference, because I feel like you can overcome that. Third is Houston. This is a major hotbed for recruiting, and there is no P5 team near or south of Houston in the state of Texas that currently is occupied by Power 5 team. So this could be like the last piece of Texas to add on with the Power 5 conference to make, let's say if it's the Big 12 or something, to make them better, or if another conference better. For UCF, so since Florida, like Texas, is a good recruiting area, you want to get the best Group of 5 team within that state as of right now, and UCF is clearly that. In the past couple years, they've won 10 plus games. They were knocking on the door, top 10, trying to knock on the door for playoffs because they had an undefeated season once. Now other sports are hit and miss, but for football, it makes total sense in the world for them to be included. 5 is Cincinnati. Again, one of those situations where Ohio is a good recruiting state, and with Cincy's recent success, and not just football, but they've also been attracted by other sports as well, and the fact that it's in the thick of a Big Ten market, that could be something for them to explore potentially. 6 is Boise State. Now, they're not a good market at all, I will admit that, and they're not as big brand as these others, but they're consistently good. At least in football, they're always consistently good, and they pay their dues to try to get a P5 invite. And especially if you're a conference that does decide to add BYU, whether you're the Pac-12 or Big 12 or whatever, you're going to want at least one other Western team. Now you can do San Diego State because they're good at a lot of other sports as well, but Boise State, especially for football, seems like the most logical option here. 7, you got Memphis. Memphis is another program that's been on the rise, and they've done really well. Went to a New Year's Six Bowl back in 2019, and went to the college basketball championship game for the men's side back when D Rose was there and all that. So they've been pretty good. And last but not least, you can kind of go either way here. You can go San Diego State, like I mentioned earlier, or you can go SMU here because again, Texas, good recruiting area and all that. It makes sense. So it's not as attractive as UCF or even Houston within their own state, but it's a good enough area. So those are my kind of top 8 teams I would include in if I were a conference. So now for the scenarios. So scenario 1 is that nothing happens with the other conferences. Just the SEC gets Oklahoma, Texas, and then the Big 12 will just add their teams, and that's it. Now the question is, do they add 2 teams to get back to the right number, or do they add 4 teams to kind of give themselves more of a cushion in the case of this happens again, or just to become stronger in general because you just lost your 2 best programs? That makes the more logical sense for me is to do 4. If they decide to do 2 teams, I think it will be Houston and UCF. Just because again, Houston get that last big market team in the state of Texas, and then for Florida, obviously you get a good recruiting base there. Now, if it's a 4-team scenario, then I think they will get UCF, they will get Houston, then I think they'll get BYU because they deserve to be there, the big brand and all that. And then they have an option of either getting another West team in Boise State or something like that, but I think they're going to go a different route and get Cincinnati. So that way they can get another good recruiting state in Ohio. And that would be your big 4. Because I feel like if you can add those 4 teams, I mean, you have Boise State, Memphis, but other than that, if you're talking about just adding G5 teams or independent teams on, that's the best you can most likely do with the Big 12 if you want to still be a Power 5 conference. So there you go. That's your best bet. Now, for scenario 2, this is a scenario where the Big 12 dissolves. So you just have 4 super conferences instead. Each team will go to 16 at least. A couple can go to 18. But for this scenario, though, I'm not going to have the scenario where you have teams, realigning, adding, subtracting. It's just all additions only. So if you're the ACC, you get Notre Dame as a full-time partner, and then you plug West Virginia for the Big 12. It just makes total sense, geographical-wise, makes all the sense in the world. West Virginia used to be the Big East, all that, so the East to be over there just doesn't make any sense. Why West Virginia is part of the Big 12 special sense, except this one year or 2 with Will Greer, it's like they really haven't been that relevant in the Big 12 anyways. So it just makes sense for them to be an ACC. Then for the Big 10, you're going to get Iowa State to partner up now with your rival Iowa. It makes logical sense there. Then you get Kansas and Kansas State against near Nebraska. Football makes logical sense there. And then you get Oklahoma State as well, since Oklahoma would have been left in the dust since their rival Oklahoma and Texas went to the SEC. And then for the Pac-12, I feel like you add on BYU. Makes logical sense there. And then you take the other remaining Big 12 teams in TCU, which used to be with BYU in a conference, and then Texas Tech, which is the very tip of West Texas, so it's kind of considered West, and then Baylor. So now you can get a nice, good geographical footprint there as well. And I feel like if that scenario, that ain't bad. If you're, it sucks for if you're the Big 12 commissioner or something, you have to dissolve and all that. That kind of sucks. But if that were to happen, and then this format, I just laid out happens, that's not bad at all. Now, of course, teams like UCF, Houston, Cincinnati will still get left out, but this makes logical sense here. Now, for the scenario 3, and this is the biggest scenario, is it's just a complete realignment, basically like a free-for-all like it was over a decade ago, just complete chaos. Now, this one was very hard for me to predict and kind of come up with, but I did my best, and let's give it a go. So for the SEC, obviously get Oklahoma, Texas, and subtraction is none. Now, there are some teams that could subtract, like for example, Vanderbilt. They haven't been relevant at all in this conference, and they may be thinking, let's go try the ACC or let's go try that instead. But if you're Vanderbilt, it's like the SEC is the power conference. You want all that money and all that. Even if you do lose, you still get all that money and TV contracts and all that. So it's like, do you want to risk leaving all that and try to have better success in ACC? I'm not sure if you want to. Or if you're in Missouri, it's like, do you want to go back to the Big 12? It's just like, because you haven't been that relevant since you've been in the SEC. It's like, maybe, but I doubt it. Because it seems like when you're in SEC, you want to stay in there since it's the best conference. So that's what that is for now. Now for the ACC, like I said, you get Notre Dame earlier. I do feel like you pluck West Virginia. And then I feel like you get two Group of 5 teams here. And UCF, again, Florida get recruiting area. And then Memphis because of what they've done. And that way you can get some more southern states in the ACC and get some of those recruiting areas. And the subtractions, I feel like you can lose Pittsburgh and Boston College. And where they would be lost to is then the Big Ten. So the Big Ten would then add Boston College, Pittsburgh, and I feel like they would add Cincinnati as well because that's a perfect Big Ten area and they've been a pretty good program. But now they're going to lose one. And I feel like the one team they would lose in this situation is Nebraska, because Nebraska, since they've been there, has never felt like they deserve to be in Big Ten, and it hasn't ever been a good fit. So you're in Big 12, you get Nebraska back, which is a big brand. They haven't been good, but they're a big brand. You get Houston, good area like I mentioned earlier, and then there's either two scenarios. Then you can get like an SMU in Tulsa or something like that, or you can try to poach from the Pac-12 because I know that Arizona schools, both Arizona and Arizona State, wouldn't mind leaving. And if that's the case, then you can plug them. If you can get Arizona, Arizona State, Nebraska back, and then Houston, that's not a bad recovery at all. It's going to be nothing compared to losing Oklahoma, Texas, but that's not a bad recovery option. And then the Pac-12, if you're losing Arizona, Arizona State, you got to get two people. So you're going to get BYU, obviously. Not even going to explain why it makes obvious sense. And then you're probably going to go Boise State. Now, if they keep Arizona State, and then let's say the Big 12 adds, like a SMU and Tulsa or something like that I mentioned earlier, well, the Pac-12, you want to get to at least 14, if not 16. You want to get more teams here. So then you get BYU, Boise State, like I mentioned, but you also can go get San Diego State, good recruiting area, and then Colorado State. Just because I feel like it's between Colorado State at this point and then either a Nevada or a Utah State. You could get Nevada, since you don't have a Pac-12 team in the state of Nevada. That'd be good recruiting and all that. I would go Colorado State, but we'll see there. I feel like Nevada's a good option. And that's kind of your deal there. So in that scenario, you get 16 teams SEC, 16 teams ACC, 16 teams Big 10. You get 14 teams Big 12, and then you get either, depending on what scenario, like I mentioned, either keep 12 teams in Pac-12, or you go up to 14. So let me know what you think of all my predictions there. Like, let me know what you think of all this, because this is kind of hard to predict. Again, I'm going to mention, this is not all set in stone. This could all be hoopla like it has been in the past. This is just if this ends up happening. I'm excited to see if it does. There's reports that in a couple weeks this become final, if this is true. So you should be on the lookout for this. Thank you very much for listening to my podcast today. Please subscribe to my channel. Tell me about me. Thank you very much. You all have a wonderful weekend.